Okay, here we go. All right. Sweet. Okay, so let's wait for people to roll in. I got the camera. Then I think I can click live on, or I just have to watch my own video on there. And sure, why not? Let's put this camera here. Little tiny camera.
Cool. Okay. Did you need to sign in, Brian?
No, you can just like watch the video from your own stream or from your own account, and it should work.
Booming.
Cool, yeah, but we're all mic'd up, so.
What is clean coffee?
Great marketing ideas don't just fall from the sky. They make print.
You have to watch an ad.
Yeah, you can hear the ad in the background.
Okay, sweet.
Cool, I'll let you be at the helm of...
Okay, sweet.
Hi, Andrea. Andrea?
Oh, here, we can mute this one, or like, so we aren't hearing us. But, all right, let's see. Cool. All right, quality looks good. Seems like audio is working. So we are getting this cupping set up here, but kind of have like a little bit of a schedule, surprisingly, versus all the other live streams. But today I thought it'd be fun for us to kind of reintroduce Prestin from Flower Child. So he's going to talk a lot about himself. There's an original video we shot a year ago, right? That was a while ago.
Almost a year, yeah.
Yeah. And it's been really interesting to kind of see how, at least you guys in the enthusiast community, you guys have been picking up his coffees, and it's been really interesting to see how his business has kind of evolved across the past year. So definitely want to catch up on that. And then also, talk a bit about like what your background is in case anybody is new here and hasn't heard about you yet. But I think we'll give it like another two-ish minutes and let people roll in, and we'll kind of go from there. But yeah, we've got this cupping setup of a variety of coffees. And let me see, I'm going to share this into some other places so people can come and hang out with us. Have about 15 people in here, which is a lot more because it's a Friday and it's also right before the New Year's. But I guess people have nothing else better to do, so they're hanging out with us. But yeah, we want to talk about what grinder are you going to use. So we actually got all these coffees set up and they're ground with an Ode with SSP burrs, the MP burrs. So they're pretty transparent.
Ground pretty fine. For the cupping, I'm grinding at relative, I know, with the settings, but on the finer side, 4-ish. So pretty fine compared to, say, a medium or darker roast. We do have a mixture of roast styles in today. The finer I go, the higher the extraction, and in Flower Child's case, the more you're going to get out of the coffee. So that's why it's so fine. And we're going to let these cool down and cup through. Thanks for being here. Do we start?
We can definitely start now. So let's kind of get that little catch up and hear about Prestin's background, and then we can also get this cupping because we did add water over these and we got a timer going, and we can talk a bit about all these coffees after. But the main kind of focus of today is actually chatting about cleanliness in coffee, clean coffee. Like, what does that actually mean? Where does it maybe change across kind of the entire world of coffee, right? From green coffee all the way to roasting to all the way to even brewing, right? Where can that get, maybe become unclean, or does cleanliness even mean at all? So that's kind of the main thought on today, but feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We got the computer here, so we can actually read your guys' stuff. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Prestin. So I always want to have this like basic, want to show you guys like who people are. So what is your background in coffee?
Yeah.
Like, how long have you been doing it?
I know, and it's like some people have a huge background in coffee, and you know them through their whole story because they broadcast it or whatever. And I have a huge background in coffee, but I didn't broadcast it. It's been all behind the scenes, some behind the bar, actually a lot behind the bar. But the topic, like, I love that this is the topic today because it's kind of my catalyst into roasting and green buying and trying to find coffees that are clean and also roast them for clarity and cleanliness in the cup. So that's a lot of it is my motivator. But yeah, so last year we did that video and I was basically hurting to just get people to try the coffee, taste the coffee, buy the coffee because, I was just basically new to a lot of people in the world of coffee. Even though people in the industry might know me, that's not that many people. It's a small world. So it was like really big for you to put me up there on the internet and basically just say, hey, there's a good roaster out there. And I was, years going into, starting cafes, running cafes, starting roasting programs for other companies. That was 10 plus years of my life, kind of specializing, building, learning, kind of seeing what I wanted, also vetting a lot of coffee importers that wanted to sell a certain direction of green and also, finding my way through all that throughout the years. Took a lot of time on other people's terms, and now it's on my terms, and I'd be buying maybe a little more expensive coffees that I think don't compromise quality in the cup while also compensating farmers best as possible. So it's been a trip. 2 years in, Flower Child has gone from struggling to keep the lights on to now paying rent on a few things. That roaster rent is expensive, but it is totally worth it to get started, and I'm excited to be where we are today. Thank you to my wholesale accounts for keeping me afloat and subscribers. But yeah, you guys have really brought me up, and I hope that you've enjoyed the coffees because I think the coffees have been outstanding, world class, up against all the types of roasters out there. It's hard to differentiate yourself, but I'm excited. That's kind of the backstory. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel, if anyone has any specific questions, feel free to ask that in the chat. But yeah, one thing kind of how I discovered this was, this was what, two-ish years ago. Well, we actually met through Fellow when I was still there, and I didn't even know that he was a roaster. I didn't even know anything about Preston's background, and he just had this coffee, and I tasted it, and I was just really blown away. I think this was I can't exactly remember the coffee. It was the coffee you had before the churroso.
I had Astrid's.
Yeah, it was an Astrid Medina Pink Bourbon. I was like, it was a Pink Bourbon, but yeah, I tasted it and I was like, whoa, this actually really reminds me of Say. I really like Say. So it really reminded me of that. And I was like, wait, I'm on the West Coast. I'm in the Bay Area. What is going on here? And then I was like, is this, I think I made some comment. I was like, hey, is this like Say or whatever? And it's like, no, this is your roast. It's your coffee. And I was like, oh, this is interesting because it's been, I just like never tasted something of that quality or just very unexpected. So I kind of bothered Preston for a very long period of time. I was like, hey, when are you going to launch? When can I buy your stuff? I want to buy your coffee, right? And kind of pestered him a lot, and eventually he was able to get his coffee roasting up, and then was able to even make that video with him. And I was just really passionate about sharing that flavor with you guys, and that's why I'm like so happy that people actually watched that video. I'm so happy we shot that video, and like now at least among the enthusiast community, at least a lot of people watch these videos. People have gotten the coffee, and it's like, yeah, this is fantastic stuff, and it is exactly up there with a lot of the quote unquote top roasters around the world, which is it's just like insane, because it's just like, hey, there's this local guy that I know that is putting out quality coffees of this caliber out there. So that was kind of like how we've developed our relationship, our friendship across the past 2-ish years. And it's just been really amazing to kind of see the growth, and now the fact that you have multiple coffees on your menu. I think before you had like maybe two at the most,
and I
right?
can barely move them.
Yeah, and then now it's like there's something new like every single like few weeks, a month is like multiple coffee releases. So it's been awesome to see that. Somebody has asked, how would you describe your roasting style and philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, clean coffee is kind of a catalyst, part of the formula. But roasting, I'm not a big fan of calling it light roast or Nordic roast as so much as just it's light roast. So basically roasting to bring out the inherent qualities in the seed from the cherry without imparting too much flavor from the roast. So I'm trying to develop the sugars in the coffee without burning them. I'm trying to develop my yard without taking it so far as to bake out any inherent qualities in the coffee. So I'm doing a light roast, fully developed. My philosophy on that is basically, what's that cherry like? And can we get it as close, to what the roasted seed to the cherry as possible, or to have some kind of, clarity from the cherry into the seed through the roast without imparting roast on it. I think that's basically it. It's harder said than done. It's harder done than actually said, but that alone takes a lot of work and years of trial and many errors. And the errors are big because they're expensive. But I'm glad to be where I am now, because I have a lot of data to back that philosophy up and to deliver. That makes sense.
Yeah. Andrea has asked, what do you use to roast? And for how, I think he's also asking how long you've been roasting, and also asking, do you ship internationally? Do you ship to Italy?
Yes, I ship international. Thank you, Bill, over at Hydrangea, for helping me with figuring out Shopify. I do ship international. I roast on a Loring K15, one of the earlier models. And I much prefer convection roasting, especially for what I'm doing, fully developed light roast. Convection will really help versus conduction can be very difficult to get the seed thoroughly roasted in and out without roasting more of one part of the seed than the other. So the Loring has been awesome. Shout out to convection. What else?
I think it's also asking like how long. It might be a question either on how long are your roasts taking, or how long have you been roasting for?
I don't even know. I started roasting in a loft in Brooklyn on an SF1, a conduction roaster. Like many of us, we wanted a way into the industry, and there was no literature, there was no information on how to do it well, or even how to get started. And a buddy of mine had bought an SF1 and then an L12 from Probat, and we kind of learned by doing, and really kind of expanded our knowledge on how far we want to go and what helps what. eventually it became, oh, we need more air going through this conduction roaster. Oh, we need a convection roaster. Yeah. Sorry, there was a car chase outside.
Yeah, there's some stuff happening outside, so we're looking to make
East
sure.
Oakland, let's go.
Yeah, so we're in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
by the way, if you were curious.
Yes.
But yeah, there might be some car noises if you guys can hear that, but we'll keep going.
Long answer, it's been about 10 years going from Probat to Probat, essentially, to jumping onto a Loring and being very, very happy with the results. Because I was trying to do what I'm doing now on a P12 last I worked for roasting, and it was very, very difficult. I just have so much more control now on the air roaster.
I was expecting a crash noise to occur there. Okay.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah, no, we were looking at
it was serious cat and mouse going on there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool, but feel free to keep asking questions. If you weren't roasting on a Loring K10, what would you like to roast on? And maybe I missed this earlier. How would one start roasting? So.
Yeah, I mean, start with a small roaster, 2 kilo, 1 kilo, something like that. And there are a lot of great options now. When I started, we've come a long way. There's a lot of tech in coffee now that has really been introduced to the hobbyist, or maybe, people who are looking to get, further along in their coffee journey. So I'm not gonna like suggest a roaster, but there are a lot of great options out there that could get you started, and then buy from Coffee Shrub or Sweet Maria's and other places that have small amounts. There are so many more resources online for just buying small bags of coffee, green coffee, to kind of get your hand at trying at the roasting and cupping and all that.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, okay, we got about, 40 people here. Pretty cool. Have you guys all tasted his coffees before? Have you picked up any of these coffees? Because I think some people have, because we got a question that says, I don't know if this has been asked before, but are you, from Tenkai, he says, are you wanting to stick with wash coffees, or have you, will you roast other processed coffees?
Totally. I mean, I guess it goes back to, part of our philosophy and our standard is that we want coffee that's clean, coffee that doesn't impart any off flavors. And there are a lot of different reasons for this. With certain processing, it can be difficult. There are clean anaerobics, there are clean naturals, there are clean honeys. I think the reason why I haven't bought into that too much, partly is just I don't have much buying power. I'm a teeny roaster who doesn't have a lot of room for expansion into other realms. I would, if I'm doing other processes, generally I'm going to want to move them quicker too. But there's a lot of logistics to that. But overall, yes, I will be buying different types of processing, as long as the coffee's clean.
Yeah.
As long as there's clarity in the cup, it's nuanced, and it doesn't, put off any off flavors.
Yeah, so there's definitely, a standard here. Like his standard, I'll say Preston's standard is definitely really high. For you taste a lot of the coffees, you're like, whoa, this is actually good stuff, good quality stuff across the entire selection of coffees. So that's been, I think now we can kind of get more into this discussion of clean coffees. We got some questions about, how do you define off flavors? Like what exactly makes them off? So we can totally get to that as we taste some of these coffees. So feel free to keep asking these questions. We'll begin answering them as we taste these coffees. But I guess, do we want to talk about what is on the table first before, or do we want to, how do we want to do this?
Yeah, let's address what is clean coffee,
Okay.
and then let's cut through let's talk about what the coffees are on the table, and then kind of correlate those pieces of information. So what is clean coffee? So that's a big question, and I don't think it actually gets asked that often. So I'm really, really glad that you're asking that question. Because I've had a lot of people, customers and otherwise, ask me like, there's something there and I can't quite figure it out. And so I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. I think the more you taste coffee, the more you can delineate the differences, defects, and what is an on flavor, what is an off flavor. Sure, it's subjective, but there are objective standards that the SCA and otherwise that roasters like myself follow to qualify a coffee as a clean coffee or a vibrant coffee or a well produced coffee grain. So first off, you have Q graders know about this. When you get your green coffee, is it clean? Does it look evenly dried? Was it picked at peak ripeness? Were they picked evenly at peak ripeness? So there's so much that happens to the maturation of the fruit, to the picking of the fruit, that adds to the cleanliness of the coffee. If you get a lot of Quakers, those are unripe cherries being picked and processed, and that's going to give you a dry, sawdust is my aspartame kind of flavor to the cup. There's a lot of defects that can be noted that affect the flavor in the cup, but you can look at the green coffee and get a really good idea. And then you can also look at the roasted coffee and get a very strong idea. Because we're talking about, is this a good green coffee? Is this a well-processed coffee? That raw product is number one. And you're gonna be able to taste that in the cup, but you're also gonna have, is the roast imparting any off flavors? Is it tipped? Is it scorched? Is it baked out and hollow, missing the core of what that coffee is about? And those are off flavors, or sometimes missing flavors. So off flavors have a lot of different manifestations, right? And when I'm selecting a coffee, I want that coffee to be nuanced, complex, high in acidity, sweetness, body, and overall character of that variety that I'm looking at from that area, aka terroir. Is the terroir pronounced without an overall earthiness?
Technical difficulties. Technical difficulties.
Oh yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, pull it back.
There we go. Okay. Now we're back. All right, we're back. Technical difficulties, guys. Sorry about that. It happens. Yeah. Anyway. All right. We should be back now. There we go. Yeah, so we have some questions. Okay.
That's a good question, Jordan. So clean has many different implications. Thank you for sticking with us. Clean has, when people say clean, that has many different implications. So, we're talking about how clean is the raw product, how clean is the roast, and then the end, once you want to enjoy it, how clean is the cup that you've brewed? So there are a lot of implications to clean.
I think if I lower the brightness of this monitor, it won't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Cool. Lower heat. Camera overheated. We whipped out the better camera for today, so it's like, yeah. Okay, all right, we opened some windows, so we get some airflow in here. Clean is a very interesting term. I think the definition of this also is very different among so many, like everybody. What is kind of your definition? Like if you were to simply say like, this is what I think cleanliness means, like how would you simplify that for someone?
Yeah, I think it's that's
a very
that's
complex
a good question.
question.
Well,
It's
it
very
is
complex.
and it isn't because I want the coffee to be high in sweetness, acidity, body, nuance, character of that variety without any of these defects. That's including defect of ferment, which is still a defect in the SEA, by the way, defect of bug damage, Quakers. I don't want to taste any of those things. I just want the sweetness and acidity of that coffee to clearly shine in the cup. That's basically what I want from a coffee.
Yeah.
If I'm getting earthiness, that's not a clean cup. It's pretty good. Sometimes you get some earthiness with the nuance of the cherry, but it's going to inhibit the score and my impression of that coffee naturally because it's got some off flavors. Like we talked about, all those defects do play into a factor. And sometimes a coffee cherry isn't super ripe when they're picking it. That has a huge implication of how much flavor you're going to get out of the cup, out of the cherry seed at the end of your brew.
Says, how do you think about roasting for solubility? We've seen Say adapt over time as customers have struggled to brew balanced coffees with hard to extract roast styles.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you. I think overall what roasters are trying to do is to provide the clearest picture possible, right? And I think what I've seen is that if you don't have a great grinder, it's going to be hard to replicate what they're getting in their lab or on their cupping table or at their cafe. Roasting for solubility is an important factor. Is it everything? I don't think so. I think that there are too many things involved to say that I just roast for solubility. I do roast so that solubility and the solubility that is in the coffee is very high so that you can get the most out of the coffee. I think you can, speaking of that particular roaster and some people who are minded in roasting, you can manipulate your brew to have a higher solubility without a nice grinder. And I've had a very, very, very basic tools and had great results. So I think in this case, roasting for solubility is not necessarily the issue if you can just learn how to pull more out of the coffee. I could do hours-long videos of how to brew in such cases that you have a crappy conical burr or a blade grinder. You could make it work. But I definitely want my coffees to be soluble, as I think a lot of roasters do. To a certain extent, once you start getting into medium roast and you start charring the seed, higher solubility is not always going to be favorable. So you'll see that a lot of light roasters like high solubility because it brings more out in the coffee. Not always inherent in anything that's going to go into darker levels of roast. Does that make sense?
So basically, brewing skill is get good. At times.
Yes.
We
Yes.
will brew later to
Yes.
show you.
Yes and no. Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, I think adaptability. You work with what you got, right?
Yeah. Okay. So we can kind of continue this discussion of cleanliness. I mean, I think it's been interesting to hear it from kind of that roaster and green buyer perspective. I also think it's really interesting to talk a bit about, even brewing. It's like things can get lost in translation.
Yeah.
But it's like think across however many people watch this, it should work out. Okay, here we go. This should solve.
Okay.
I think this will solve this problem. Yeah, the camera is getting dark roasted.
You're not.
Here we go. Let's see. There we go. Okay. I have this set up so it uses the entire sensor on this, and I think it creates way too much heat. So let's try this one. Sorry about that. I don't have the mobile streaming rig entirely perfected at times. Okay, I think we're back again. Okay, we've recovered. That's why I want to. Cool. Car chase and internet problems. What's next?
Yo, it's East Oakland. Let's go.
It's Oakland.
Stay light.
Here we go. All right, guys. Hey, this. If things went too perfect, this wouldn't be a live stream. All right. Cool. All right.
Good question. I'll answer it real quick. I do make profiles for espresso. Okay, maybe a big question, or a big answer to a simple question. I would rather say I roast. You could call it omni roast just to make it simple. But I roast so that you can brew the coffee with any device or any method and get the cleanest, clearest cup out of it. So I don't change my roast. So right now the coffee that, some coffees are much more amicable towards espresso brewing. And so I'll always recommend Bravo or Gagari, the coffee's on my menu right now, for espresso. But I would also suggest brewing differently when you're brewing espresso. I don't think espresso is a very good brewing method. If you're looking for clarity, nuance, the overall characteristic of a coffee, espresso is a pretty poor brew method. But you can alter things like lowering the pressure, getting better baskets, doctoring your puck before brew. All those things will really help. But I roast for espresso as well as pour over, all in the same roast, right? People have been calling that omni roasting. But I don't think espresso is a great way to brew. That's just what I'm going to say. I'm just going to say it.
You just
put
have
it out there.
upset a lot of people on the internet.
But it is fun, and nothing like having an espresso after, cocktails and dinner and all that, or whatever you do with espresso. I love it as an aperitif.
Yeah.
But
hey, your coffees do taste really good on espresso.
But we've been brewing it as espresso, and it's working out. I think there are definitely, when you're brewing espresso with light roast coffees, is going to be a very different procedure.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like, it's like you have to do all these, you have to pull out all the tricks, in my opinion, if you want to really maximize the amount of clarity you get in espresso as, I would argue, a filter brew, especially with some of these coffees. And at that point, it's like, you got to drop some serious cash, like potentially serious cash, if you really want to get like equivalent clarity of maximizing those nuances in espresso than something like filter. Like I could get away with brewing your coffees with a $200 hand grinder, a V60, and it would taste fantastic. If I want that same level of clarity, I feel like on the espresso end, I gotta drop like $1,000 on just the grinder, not even the machine. Well, you could go the cheaper route, get like a flare,
Sure,
lever machine, and then that's how you would do it. But it's like, I don't, that's like the challenge that I would say with maximizing clarity on espresso. But yeah, you can go with a turbo shot with reasonably priced gear, but I still don't think it gives you that level of clarity that a filter brew would give you with cheaper gear. If we were to be, look at the exact dollars, and at least my subjective rankings of like, what are the nuances of what I can actually extract out of the coffees? Okay, let's see. What is the difference between an espresso roast and a filter roast? General question?
Yeah, so we're in an interesting time in coffee, right? We have, short human history with how we experience coffee. All the way from, using these huge steam machines to brew coffee to extract flavor out of it. We've gotten, we've adjusted to a milk culture, essentially, of adding coffee to milk. To have a milk coffee flavor. And so people have identified, and there's some science there too, that darker roast coffees provide, some kind of distinction with milk when put together, right? So this idea of an espresso roast versus any other kind of roast is based off of that, right? So we have to remember that that's where we're coming from as a culture worldwide, really. And it's become common, right, to have a darker roast for espresso and a lighter roast for filter. This is not something I think is necessary, but I do see the benefits of an espresso roast, or let's just call it a darker roast that is easier to brew for espresso if you're looking to get a decent shot without having to brew at high extraction rates, right? So if you and that's what a darker roast will do for you. So basically, long answer, the difference between espresso roast and any other roast is it's darker.
Yeah. And it could go well in milk. Sometimes you do the lighter roast espresso and, you brew the light roast espresso well. You put it in milk, it kind of tastes weird, like sour milk, literally sour milk.
Yeah.
So some of those more, chocolate notes help balance things out. But I also feel like, with some of these coffees, it's like if you have a really well done Wagyu, right, or a well done steak, you're like, just let me not taste the coffee at all, right? Which is it's just fine, nothing wrong with that. But with some of these coffees, it's like Prestin here, he's gonna put a lot of work into finding these coffees and tasting them, and you don't want some of that work necessarily to get lost in translation through the roasting, right? And that's why he roasts in the way he roasts, and then also, hopefully, it doesn't get lost in brewing. But I always have felt these coffees, at least your roasting style, is pretty easy to brew. Like, I don't actually have to pull out all the tricks to brew any of these coffees. But what's really nice is I can actually push them. I actually can start whipping out all the tools, pulling really high extraction espresso or brewing at really large ratios on filter and push the coffees up to 24+%, and they taste fine, which is like, one, you can tell the green can hold up, and you can tell the roasting stock can hold up. So that's kind of like the test, is like, what is like how far can you actually push these coffees? If you wanted to hear about that, so we might talk about that after we talk about these coffees. But yeah, we've been actually streaming for about 40 minutes, and people have been hanging out with us the entire time. Yeah. Feel free to keep asking us, but let's we can get back to answering questions after. Let's talk about these coffees here, because I think these coffees represent a very interesting presentation of cleanliness in coffee. We have clean coffees and we have some not so clean coffees. And I brought some coffees here just as an example of that as well. But yeah, I guess, do we want to talk about what these are?
Yeah, well, I can talk about the coffees that I have, which are Flower Child coffees. Some coffees that hit the mark for me, that pass the grade of this is clean, this is expressive, terroir forward. So one that barely hit the mark, but I thought it was so interesting, was our last Honduras of the year is a Pacas. It's just very malic, bright, and it has a juicy aspect to it. Just an overall very interesting profile as far as how long it is. It's got a very long melon tamarind thing going on. We have Pepe Ijon, his Sidra, Also very, very clean, just immaculate, honestly. And then we have Danche and Gagari with some Yurgachev coffees here. And then we also have...
Yeah, and we have 2 other very interesting coffees. Actually, I have the box here. Just might as well show these off. But yeah, you know, when I always think about the coffees that you put out, for me personally, as like daily drinkers, because I like cleaner wash coffees currently. That's kind of my enthusiast journey, is like you get in maybe with some of these coffees, which we'll talk about, and then just a lot of people end up here, which is quite interesting. But I like balance in my life, or I like to operate on very weird spectrums at times.
Appreciate that you try it all.
Yeah, I like to try it out. So we have a co-ferment. So these both are from Mod Cup, which is out in New Jersey. And yeah, so one of these coffees is a Lulo co-fermented coffee. So this is where I would make the argument as co-ferments being some of the least clean coffees out there. So that this is a very interesting coffee, which is like on the entire different spectrum. It's on the other side of the table, so you see here. And then we also have a Wilton Benitez. I think this is a double anaerobic thermal shocks tabby. Yeah, double anaerobic thermal shock. Lots of words.
Yeah.
You buy coffee nowadays too, which is like really interesting. Like as a consumer, I'm looking at these things and it's like, I've always wondered is like, are people fascinated with the processing or are they fascinated with the flavor notes? Because like you're able to get these really goofy flavor notes, like honestly pretty goofy flavor notes. Like pineapple yogurt is a flavor note on this coffee, and then yeah, I don't even know. But the point is here is like where it's like things are touched at different stages by a producer, and then you know maybe even it's touched post. You know, when the coffee shows up at a roaster, and you have stuff like the MSG infused coffee, you have stuff like the Mountain Dew Baja Blast infused coffee. So I don't have those coffees here with me. I wanted to bring them as an example, but I decided to just bring more traditional.
Down that Baja
Yeah,
Blast.
the Baja Blast is really interesting, but it's like. The point is like when we taste these coffees, I think it would be interesting to have you tell us about what you're tasting and where you are, like what is not clean to you, or what are you like where are you tasting, right?
That's a good
like what has been messed with, if we can put it in that sense. But yeah, you know, these coffees are, I think these coffees are like. Still, they serve a really unique purpose in all of this. But yeah, we can go and talk about that as we begin tasting.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the thing when we're cupping is to just go from one cup to the other and see if you find any distinction. Does it stand out to you? Is it easy to taste what's going on? You know? If it's not, then maybe there's not a lot there. It's pretty hard to mess up a cupping. So, you know, you just throw hot water on it. I stir the cup because I'm, you know, genuinely cupping lighter roast coffees, and I sample roast fairly light.
Wow. I mean, just like super. Oh, I'm gonna keep tasting these, but like, kind of if you taste all his coffees. And you have them all side by side, there's such structured definition of acidity of these nuances. It's like you're tasting these and it's like, for me, I always get like a very upfront presentation of some sort of vibrancy, some sort of acidity. Usually that comes in like a fruit note. And then what's interesting is there's just this linger of acidity that it's like, yes, there's acidity and it just keeps on giving. And then it kind of then ends up becoming really sweet. And that kind of linger of acidity and sweetness is what I've observed across a lot of his coffees here. But it's just that definition of, it's like structure. It's like, here's something happening, here's something happening, here's something happening, and then it keeps, and then it finishes sweet. And this is like what, in my mind, has been the definition of cleanliness for a while, is like that definition of of like a flavor. It's like I'm not tasting any additional like weird layering on anything.
Right.
Although layering is, could be fun. But anyway, that's
great cupping notes, Brian. Wow,
Yeah.
look at you.
learning.
Yeah, totally. It's high definition happening right now. But I was just thinking, also the clean part is really easy. Does it feel clean? Does it taste clean to you? As far as what you were saying, there's no other defects coming through. Is it long? Is it dynamic? Which we're getting like 4 different colors and equations here that are very much their own style. And then as we move on into these coffees here.
That's
Yeah.
it's like oh my god. So
Holy shit. So, yeah, I think so that like, does it feel clean? I'm getting earthiness. And earthiness is a nice way to say it tastes dirty. It tastes like it came from the ground, the soil, and it wasn't washed off. So I'm getting earthiness, which is a big mark down in the cup. So that's an easy one. I think anybody can find when they're tasting coffee, whether brewed or cupped, is does it taste like dirt? So there's one. And then we talked about ferment. Ferment is a huge problem for me when I'm looking at coffees. I know they're very popular right now, but I'm not very popular, so it doesn't matter, right? Ferment is a huge defect for me, and what it does is it can overpower any nuance that's in the coffee. So I think this is we're in a time where it's kind of a flavor trap. Oh, that's interesting. Ooh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
It's got something, right? And definitely has something, and I think it is interesting in and alone of itself. I've experienced it on accident, and also just with other programs that I've been a part of. It can be exciting, but I'm also thinking there's more to this coffee that could come through. Now, ferment is a great way to make a coffee seem more exciting. Like I'll see a lot of Castillos and Bummer Caturas being fermented more to make it seem more exciting, thereby reducing whatever that coffee is. Maybe not that exciting without some kind of processing hitting it.
yeah, so what's been interesting too is you taste these coffees versus these, and I definitely think there's kind of like I would say a divide in the enthusiast community right now where a lot of, at least my personal friends, a lot of people, and online, like a lot of people really like these coffees. But I still think a lot of people get in with these guys and then they kind of come back at times. Like you need balance. I think you need kind of balance as an enthusiast where it's like, I can't drink that all day. I can enjoy it here and there. It's kind of like the fun sports car I take out on the weekend. It's like, this is what can be out there.
It's an experience.
It is an experience. I mean, grinding these coffees and brewing them is also such a unique sensory experience. I mean, your grinder smells like...
I'm going to have to purge my grinder.
Yeah, you need to purge this grinder now.
I'm going to have to open it up and clean it because this coffee went through my grinder. But yeah, it is interesting, and I think it's I will say this, like these coffees that have been co-fermented and played with and infused and all this that we're seeing out on the market right now are great ways to bring people in to experience what coffee can be like. It can be like a lot of things. Some of you might remember in the 80s and 90s, they were roasting with almonds and blueberries and things in the freaking roaster. And now we're experiencing it, at the mill or pre-mill at the washing station, fermentation station, and that has a bigger impact, I think. And we're seeing this as a big wave because it's different. Overall, like I don't find it that interesting as much as it is something new. I don't know what coffee is on the table right now. It could be a Bunk Castillo. It could be an amazing geisha. It's been reduced to a certain level. It has it's one-dimensional.
Yeah, that is one thing where I have observed this with some of these more processed coffees is that they do become more one-dimensional. But at the same time, what I've observed of serving coffee to a ton of people is that this is still easier. In my opinion, is that this is still easier for majority of people to taste. Is like they taste it. Oh yeah, there's fruits. You give them beautifully roasted washed Panamanian geisha, and they're like, oh, that's like a weekly brewed tea, or what's going on?
Yeah.
Whereas like I feel like those beautiful washed coffees, you still get there's still a little bit of that kind of connoisseur tag tied to them. It's like, oh, you gotta kind of be into this. But we're kind of seeing like people get in with these coffees. And people drink these still all the time, but it's like, I just think about my journey into any of this coffee stuff. And it started with a Ethiopian natural from Huck that I got on trade, right? It was like, it's a coffee I would hate today, absolutely would hate today, compared to, even like the standard of naturals that I like to drink. But it was that first time I experienced, I was like, whoa, there's blueberry in coffee. Like, what is going on here? But kind of tying this back together with cleanliness, the way that, like, I don't think I have the best palate in the world, and I'm learning doing these types of cuppings and tasting a lot more coffees, is that I would say that the acidity is wrapped around something. It's like there is something going on that is not giving you that exact definition of acidity. And I think this is fun. At times it's fun to taste, but that's like what I would taste here. It's like a layered red fruit versus like a really juicy red fruit. I don't know if that's like a good example, but that's like what I'm tasting between like this and any of these other coffees. And then this co-ferment is just like really out there.
Yeah, it's a great way to describe it. When people say that it has a nice structure and it has complexity, it's because they can taste those things. And yes, these are fun and exciting and upfront, sweet, but maybe not having a ton of layers and complexity and structure as much as they are giving you a very obvious note. So, and yeah, you're right. There takes some dial in to roaster to roaster, coffee to coffee with coffees that are on the cleaner side without ferment.
Yeah, I mean, I've always experienced with these advanced processing techniques, like those kinds of coffees, is that I find it really interesting now to actually be able to taste layering because of the process. It's like like the process itself is what is layered, not necessarily the coffee or like the acidity. For example, like I still go back to these where I'm saying, oh yeah, there is layered acidity. Like this acidity has different levels to it, as from when you initially sip it to when it it leaves your mouth, the aftertaste. Whereas these coffees, it's like there is that transition amongst the processing itself. And I think that's what's actually really fun for me. But I still keep going back to these wash coffees because maybe I'm just like an acidity buffer. I'm just like, oh my God, it's like there's so much, so dynamic. Like these coffees are all quite dynamic, tasting these right now.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot to be had either way, right? If you like, darker roasted, funky coffees, that's out there for you. I think the more you taste coffee, maybe the more you want out of it. And that's when you start getting into the details, which is inherently what happened to me was we saw these big roasters buying amazing coffees, and then you're not really tasting much of it because it was roasted to bits, or there was process in the way. So I wanted to get my hands on, in the process to get those coffees that would be as clean and as clear as possible with that nuance, without anything else getting in the way, including roast, including process.
Okay. We have some questions,
Okay.
so let's catch up on the chat now. And yeah, I have some thought-provoking questions. Okay. So, well, the first one, is for you. How do you develop a roasting profile, and do you use sample roasting as a tool for profile development?
I don't use a sample roaster for profile development. I have basically just been practicing, as we all do, as I go. So developing a profile started when I first started roasting, back before any kind of digital information. You just wrote it down. And then kind of see, okay, how much time in this drum roaster does the coffee generally get developed, at certain temperatures. So basically trial and error is how I developed roast. And then, collecting that data over the years so I can look back at that coffee and see where its water activity and its moisture content, elevation, where it was that year, and how it roasted and how my cupping notes correlated, and decide, okay, that's how I want to roast it this year, but maybe back off a little bit just because either the water activity or the moisture content's higher depending on how the harvest went. So the profile is based off of the work done before, which is so cool that I have a lot of years to just kind of jump in and say, okay, this is going to work because it's worked before. But also based off of the data that the importer, exporter gives me as well.
Okay, and then we have a gear-related question. Okay, this is probably for me. Could you please answer if the MC6 would complement an EG1 with carvers? Are they too similar? Okay, coffee grind-related question. MC6 would be probably better on espresso. EG1, I would probably use different. I would use the ultras. EG1 is much better at filter, or like if you were to pair those, I would keep those separate. Core is pretty similar, I think, to MC6. Okay. All these fancy processes are neat and I do enjoy them, but I feel sometimes it misses the point of tasting the terroir of each bean and more tasting the processing method. Yeah, I mean, that is fun, I think, for tasting the process, because like there's so many different. I mean, I just think about Diego Bermudez coffees, and I'm like, the first time I had Letty Bermudez was like a mind-blowing experience. It really brought me back to that first time I had an Ethiopian natural and it tasted fruitiness. Was like, whoa, this processing stuff can do something like that. But after tasting a lot of thermal shock coffees, I'm like, it's exactly like the process, right? You're like, oh, I'm really used to tasting wash coffees, I'm really used to tasting to natural coffees. And like, maybe this is the enthusiast part of me speaking, but I think people get bored of a lot of these processing methods, right? And then they seek out the next type of processing method. So you then go to like the 720-hour Bermudez for fermented coffees, and then people keep jumping between like the million processing techniques that exist out there. And I think that's actually really, really fun to like keep buying those coffees and taste what's out there. But it's like, is this processing method hype? Is it what we should, I think what I hear from my industry friends is like, oh my God, is this going to ruin coffee forever? Because every producer is now going to realize like they need to do this to sell their coffee. And it's like, I think it's an interesting debate. I also feel like, well, we do have a question here regarding pay for producers too. I do think this is like a potentially, I hear it from both sides, is like, it's like I think my understanding is we as an industry should be paying producers more money. We want to give them as much, we want them to do well. But then at the same time, there's this group of people who are like, hey, don't do that to the coffee because you are messing with it. And then it's like, but then like because they are processing their coffees and they're elevating the quality of coffee, they're able to sell their coffee for more. So it's like very complex questions in making coffee more complex. But anyway,
yeah. And I just real quick, and we'll get into that question too. Like, let's just get into the question.
Yeah. So it's like, basically it's like, how do you think advanced processing should be viewed in relation to raising the pay for farmers in less desirable or low altitude origins? So it's just basically like, you want to elevate it's like altitude plays a big role in
so
all of that. Yeah.
In my world, I would like to see higher scoring coffees with those that I'm calibrated with in the industry to get basically a boost in pay. Right. This is kind of how the system works. We're leveraging the dollar or whatever, the euro, against producing countries. So this is a huge conversation that, should be realized, is that we're leveraging our currency as a consumer world against those who produce, right? Believe it or not, profit is not great at the roasting level either. We do this because we love it. Should have got into jewelry or something else if you want to make money, right? Like, we love this, no doubt. And, like I said, a higher scoring coffee with those, that all agree that, like, oh, this should get, we should pay more for this. Makes sense, right? Theoretically, but a coffee is worth what people will pay for it. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where it came from, whatever. If there's a buyer and it's sold, that's what it's worth, right? So, a lot of people love, this is a phenomenon of Wilton Benitez and his work, is his coffees are not cheap. And I wouldn't touch them. I wouldn't buy them. I wouldn't pay that amount for something that I think is, just not to what I'm looking for, right? So a coffee is worth what we paid for it. And you're going to start seeing, thank you, inflation, coffees are going to get more and more expensive. Coffee is still extremely affordable given, how good it is and what we're really, what we're getting from, like, say, one of our highest scoring coffees this year, Gagari and Danche, the burr is like nothing compared to the dollar, right? So we are getting some of the best coffee in the world, and it's some of Flower Child's most affordable coffee. Mm-hmm. So this relativity of what we pay for and what we get is based on you, the consumer. And then also, I just want to show you what I think is exceptional coffee. And it doesn't always have to break the bank. Sometimes you pay for it because, there's some distinction in something like Pepe's work, right? But you can get equally or even higher scoring coffees for half the price just because the market has a different, perspective on those producers. So,
it's a very complex topic.
Yeah, I don't know.
Insanely complex topic.
I can ramble on about it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
You even look at producers, it's like if they can speak English, then suddenly they can sell their coffee for more value because they can communicate better. And there are all these things that I'm not entirely familiar with that I'm learning about, which is like all these things affect the value of coffee in some sort of way, right? And what's been interesting with these coffees is that what your experience is like, this is value of coffee presented to you from a roasted coffee perspective. For most people, it's like most people aren't cupping green, they're not going to Origin, they don't get to cup a million coffees every single week. They're buying coffee from the roaster. So a lot of the times their perception of value of coffee is what is the roaster communicating to them, right? And a lot of that time it's just like, how much did I pay for the coffee? Did it taste good? Was it, did anything happen to this? Was the roaster easy to work with? What type of business is the roaster? Is it a small business? Is it like big? And all these different things kind of affect the consumer's value. Like, what do you think? Like, was it worth it, right? Mm-hmm. And then that's why it's like, for like the smaller roasters like this, like, yeah, I'm willing to pay more money because it's one guy, right? And it's like, I want to support him, but then like you might not feel the same way with some of these bigger roasters. And then like that kind of clouds this entire conversation of, well, like, what is the coffee actually worth at that point, right? Because it's like the roasters, right? Is it the roaster's job to present you value, or is it your job to brew it correctly so that you understand what it is, all right? So that's why it's like very everywhere, and I don't know. I'm just like, wow. We as an industry, like, oh my God, we have so many things to like fix or change or all of that, and I don't know what the right answer is. And I mean, these are things I'm learning every single day, basically. I love the rambling. Thank you guys so much. Okay, great. We love talking.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Do you guys listen to Lucia Solis's podcast? And what are our thoughts on it? I haven't had a chance to listen to her podcast, but I actually watched a lot of her YouTube videos. So she does have a YouTube channel, and it's like very obscure, and you should watch some of those videos, just showcasing a lot of processing techniques in coffee. Do you ever feel that you haven't paid enough for a coffee of high quality? I definitely, as a consumer, have felt that way. I mean, literally, we already talked about
I
it,
think
but like,
I did have the most affordable Pepe, really. I mean, I didn't mark it up that much.
yeah, well, like, I would just say like your Pepe, your Donche, like Donche, to me, feels like if I were to think about it as a consumer paying for, I don't know, what, 200, 250 grams, I'd pay like $40 for that.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. If you were to cup coffees side by side, I would take Donche off the table. I say this is the most valuable cup, but it is also one of the most affordable cups you will buy. So yeah, again, price and quality does not always meet up, right? So yeah, there are definite. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible and taking a hit in doing so for people to buy great coffee. But you know, like Ecuador has a minimum wage, unlike all the other countries, so coffee's gonna be more expensive, you know. So yeah, definitely haven't. You know, I think overall we don't value how special the coffees are, right? We're also coming from a world that's very commodity driven in coffee. And I know specialty is less than 1% of world trade in coffee as far as volume goes, and but I don't think we pay enough overall, and we take it for granted at these prices because people need to live. They need farming's hard work. I mean, it's insane the amount of work that they got to do to make this happen, and we need to value it more as a consumer, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like the thing is, I often experience that when I'm doing cuppings. So an example is here where you're tasting some of this and you're like, if I were to just kind of guess on what would be like the most expensive coffee out of this, and I just say, let me just throw away any of my preconceived notions on origins, on anything like that, and just go by subjective taste and just say, hey, this is what tastes like the best to me. I'd probably pick this Donche. And then you look at the price of this and you're like, how is this possible that you're getting this quality of coffee at this price point? And I also had this exact same experience with some of my cuppings at Say, where it was really funny. There was like one side of the table, there was the Lost Origin Panama Geisha, the process, like, you could totally taste there's like this yeast processing. And then next to it was this is like David Barrio, which is like this churroso from Colombia. And you tasted both of them and you're like, whoa, what, like these both are insanely high quality coffees, but Lost Origin, at least for the consumer, was what, like 3x the price. And then you're like, well, in the more blind cupping, right, where it's like we don't know what all the coffees are, we're just tasting them. It's been very interesting to kind of like wrap everything together. It's like, whoa, actually, yeah, value and quality and value are not actually necessarily so tied together that you would think, at least as a consumer, because I feel like as a consumer, I always look at like, oh, is it a geisha? How much am I getting? How much does it cost? What is the roaster, right? And what's the processing, right? And like, those are like all the interesting things that like affect us. Anyway, we've gone on like this really interesting tangent or side conversation on like also cleanliness, right? And then there's this whole cleanliness conversation.
Right.
Okay. Sure, we can
now brew.
Yeah, we can now brew.
Do we want to brew, or do you want to take? It's up to you, Brian.
We can brew.
Should we do a brew video?
Sure. Well, we can brew on the stream, and then we can record an actual brew video afterwards because we happen to be here. But feel free to ask questions. Let's definitely, for those of you guys who are looking to brew these coffees, I feel like you can brew most flower child coffees in a variety of ways. I always make the argument, with even some of these coffees is like they're so good already that you can extract them low and they taste pretty good. And then you can extract them high, they taste really good. But we'll probably do the brew and then we'll leave any sort of open Q&As and then we'll wrap up because we've been on for a little over an hour.
Thank you for your questions. Pardon my lack of articulation. I'm new to this, but thank you for forcing me to getting me out. So I'm gonna do a quick brew video because I get a lot of questions about it, and I think it would be helpful just for people to see. I got a light roast coffee. How do I treat this? So if you have a good grinder, so if you have an Ode 2 or SSP Ode or Timeless, Time More or whatever, those are good grinders. You could do what I generally do, which is a 1:18. If you have something that's not giving you enough clarity and boosting extraction with your brews, so that's anything above 20%, do a 1:17, do a 1:16. That will help you get the most out of your coffee. So like we talked about earlier in the video, adapting to what you got, you know? So if you have like a blade grinder, try a 1:16. That'll round out the profile of that coffee. Pre-wet the filter, no doubt. I like to let it sit for a while. And then I'm just gonna toss my dose in. So I'm on a V2 here. I'm gonna do a 19 gram. That's kind of my steady, 18, 19 grams generally. And then we're gonna bloom with water that's just over 200. So I'm not gonna bloom it with rolling boiling water, right? Just so that the water can absorb into the coffee a little bit easier. And there's no way around it. I had to come back to a stir stick. So I'm going to, just to boost the extraction. I think even with the, whatever grinder you have, this will help a lot. Try it out. And then I'm gonna use this as a pour spout, just to get those little areas without adding too much water. I do a 1 minute bloom. So I have Cafec T92 filters. I think April Brewer filters are great too if you're using April Brewer. This is just gonna slow down the brew quite a bit. There's a lot more drag. You could still do a 1 minute bloom with the V60 Flex papers, which I recommend over the whatever the other papery ones are. And then I'm gonna do a second bloom here.
Yeah, we'll record an actual video of how to brew after this, but we'll do the live one in case you guys have any questions.
Yeah. Okay. Let's check out the questions here.
I don't know if there are any. Okay, there's one. Do you prefer the taste of cupping or pour over?
I think I enjoy both, in their own way. But I enjoy drinking out of a cup more. I like the meditation and the ceremony of cupping a lot. But I love brewing. I mean, that's how I got into coffee, was like kind of brewing coffee with just, all the ways that you could do it and how like little differences made.
And the mellow drip life.
Yes, and I've gone to mellow drip. I have been converted. Mainly because if you don't have one, this is cool. Mainly because it's an even shower head of water. It's gently pouring down and keeping that coffee bed as a filter itself, right? So I do 2 blooms, twice the weight of the brew. So we had 19 grams in. I'm just gonna do, I did 2 40-gram blooms. and continue to do a couple pulses to the end. That's simple. I do the rest of the brew after those blooms with the mellow drip and take my sweet time. And that's big, right? Contact time with hot water will increase extraction, and in Flower Child's case, overall flavor. You see that was about 3 minutes of pour time. If I'm milking it, I can even do a couple more pulses. But the thing is not to stress too much, I think. Just enjoy it. But if you don't have a mellow drip, just be gentle with whatever kettle you're using. That's it. I like it 1 to 18. Mm-hmm. If you have a crappy grinder or you're like, about my grinder, do a 1 to 16, 17. Use 210 to bloom, and then 212 Fahrenheit when there's more water in there on the rest of the brew. And that's pretty much it. Shoot for at least 4 minutes, 5 minutes. You'll notice a huge difference between 3-minute brews and say a 5-minute brew. If you can figure it out. And those low and slow pulses will really help lengthen the time. My brews here at home have been 6, 7, 8 minutes. But that's with these filters. If you don't have those filters, no problem. You can still make it happen over 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the cool thing with these coffees is you can push them, but I want to stress this. You actually do not need to push these coffees that hard to get a lot of that definition of flavor, because all of that is just like already in there. And yes, these coffees are light, but they're not like dumb, underdeveloped light where you need to rest them for like 3 months, like that type of thing. It's like you can brew these coffees, they will taste good. Yeah, you're not gonna get any peanuts.
Yeah, and that, that's what I'd hope, that you would get a coffee and you want to taste what that coffee's like without having to worry about the roast. That's like everything to me. And obviously this is what this company is all about. So just have fun, play around with it, mm-hmm. And you're gonna enjoy. Like all these coffees with the coarser grind are very interesting to taste, even though I'm like, it's not hitting, it's still interesting, so just have fun with it, right?
Yeah. I mean, with these coffees, I personally like to do the exact opposite of this, where I use really fast flow filters. Yeah. I grind really fine, and I do a lot of kettle agitation and manual agitation versus the mellow drip type of agitation.
I think that's really fun too.
Yeah,
that provides a really cool.
Yeah, very different. I mean, we're hitting also that higher extraction, and you can brew at those different ratios, but I would say the dynamics in cup are very different between the faster flow and the slower flow. But yeah, I oftentimes think about this way. It's like, you're just making it taste like a cup thing. You're just doing that ratio.
I'm pretty much doing it. Yeah, like I want my personal taste is I want it that crystalline cup. So
yeah,
trying to keep the murkiness out, I guess.
Yeah. But this 1 to 17 plus ratio gives you that super harmonious brew, especially with brewing this way. It's like acidity and everything else is like super balanced. It's transparent. That's at least my experience with this type of brew. Whereas like if you go the super fine route and you agitate a lot of it, you can kind of shift a lot of the acidity up front. So it just provides you a very different presentation of the same coffee. But that's what's nice about these coffees is you can actually do that type of stuff. It's like, I don't need to, I used to faff around a lot more and think like, brewing some of these coffees is actually quite complex. But nowadays I'm kind of just turning my brain off and being like, I can just pour water over it. Yeah. And usually it tastes good.
Is the water hot? Is there a filter?
What do you guys, what type of water composition do you use for your coffee? I don't know if you, I think Sam answered for you. Prestin brews with Crystal Geyser.
Yeah, don't trip about water. Loud and clear. Don't trip too much about water. I do have a filter, but I've just gone back to Crystal Geyser. It has a little bit more for light roast. You know, something with a little more magnesium and calcium.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those work really well. You know, so mineral's good. It's funny, you know, bottle to bottle with crystal geyser would be different. But I wouldn't trip too hard about water. I think that's become like a bigger conversation than it really should. Because at the end of the day, if the coffee's good, it's just gonna be good. You know, in San Francisco, it was really weird roasting there because we had Hatch water, and there's literally no solubles in the water. There's nothing, no minerals, nothing in the water.
It's like 20 ppm.
Just reads zero. You know, it's a trip. And so, like, yes, there's a difference with different water, but when the coffee's good,
yeah, it does punch through a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I'm on Hatch water, 15, depending on what time of the year is, I'm at around like 15 ppm, and it is too soft at times.
Yeah.
So actually, one of my friends, Harry, he's in this chat. He'll come by with a 5-gallon and he'll fill it up and then he'll add magnesium into it. So it kind of clears up that slight thinness in the aftertaste.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times it's like if you can dial out a lot of that like very specific thing with the Bay Area Hatch water. But yeah, sometimes you just have really good water, and I just use tap water because I have Hatch, and I'm okay with coffees tasting like that at times. Do you think I could push your coffee to 118 with a ZP6? Absolutely. You can totally brew these coffees with a ZP6 1 to 17 plus easy. That's a grinder, and that would work fantastic with these coffees. It's probably, I would argue, the best filter hand grinder for under $200 that you can push high ratio. Cool. So let's taste this.
Oh yeah. Yeah, let's drink it.
And then we'll probably wrap up soon because it's around our lunchtime, and we do need to get some food, or we might order some food.
Yeah.
But feel free to ask away. Oh yeah, there's that like super integrated, like the acidity and the body and the florality, like everything is very harmonious in this brew style, and you can definitely tell that this is high extraction. Yeah,
I've been hitting 26% with these SSP, so, and it tastes great.
Yeah, I mean your coffees can handle that type of extraction, which is really amazing. What do you guys think about no bypass brewers like Tricklet or Pulsar? I think Pulsar, I think they're both great for these coffees. They let you hit this very similar type of brew without all the effort. Like you don't need to do some of this as meticulously as you like you would with a V60 or even a Kalita. You can, the Tricklet, well, especially the Pulsar now, is you just have so much control. You can easily make coffee taste like this with a lot less effort. And I think that is what's really awesome about the newer no bypass brewers. It's just cleanup is a lot more painful on the Pulsar than this. Like you just toss the filter out instead of like disassembling an entire thing.
Bit. Yeah.
But all right, we'll be on for, I don't know, five more minutes. Let's see if anything rolls on, and then we will wrap up. Wow, been like a solid 30, 40 people have been sticking with us for the past hour.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
But this is tasting really
delicious.
Good. Yeah.
That is right. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Gagari.
Yeah. I still like this is a perfect example. So this is Gagari. I'm like I can't link these things easily on my phone. So we're tasting this coffee here. All these coffees are mostly on the website still, except for the Pepe. Your Dante sold out. Everything's sold out.
Yeah,
It's all
everything's
gone.
sold out. Bear with me, world. I am having coffee coming in next week.
So this is the coffee we are tasting.
New coffees very soon. Actually, very, very fun coffees coming soon.
So we're tasting this, and yeah, this is like, you know, you would taste this and you're like, well, how much is this bag? How much are you charging for this? $25
Yeah.
for a bag.
Yeah.
This does not taste like $25 for a bag coffee here. Like
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And that's, you know, if you didn't have a bag in front of it and, you know, all the marketing that goes into it, and you just went off of taste alone, like we said, you would pay more for whatever tastes better or had more nuance or whatever. And that's, you know, part of the larger conversation about pricing and what we pay for coffee and how we treat coffee, you know. Is it a caffeine fix or is it something that you want to enjoy? I find this a very luxurious lineup right now. But yeah, you know, my pricing might be a little bit higher, but most roasters, as you can see out there, are doing about the same markup. Mine is like $1 more, so just by the fact that I can't buy bulk like other roasters, you know. The price goes down drastically after you buy a pallet of coffee. And I got to rent a roaster. I'm in California. I'm in the Bay Area, California. Yada, yada. I don't need to tell you why it's a little bit more expensive, but it is because of those things. And I'm trying to keep it accessible. But again, I find these coffees to be some of the best you can find worldwide. And you can guarantee it's not going to have any of those defects we talked about earlier in the video. That's including ferment, Quakers, you know, uneven drying, all those things. You want a coffee that's gonna make it easy for you to enjoy without any earthiness or any of those other defects getting in the way, right?
Yeah, I mean, even tasting this brew, I mean, you're brewing in I would argue, this more transparent style, this like, you know, more like 1 to 18, like it's very similar to like cupping, which I would classify as like a very transparent way of tasting coffee. You can tell, like, in terms of cleanliness, this is a pretty clean brew. Like you can maintain some of that cleanliness that you find in the cupping bowl into the brew. I just think the brew is more enjoyable to taste. I like brew. I always like, you know, I think brew is that more enjoyable way to taste it because
You're holding the cup. You get to drink.
I gotta actually drink. I don't need to drink out of a spoon.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. But
Yeah,
also,
you can't do that with a cup.
yeah. But also, the brew is generally more filtered than this.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just not a fan of no filtered immersion brews nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, however you look at it, you know, I feel like it's so much more obvious in a cupping bowl. You know, you're getting a lot of information, whereas, you know, filtered brew is just going to kind of clean up the overall, you know, body of the coffee.
Yeah. So, okay, we have 2 questions, and then we will wrap up.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, what would you recommend for someone who just started working as a roaster, but the amount of things to learn feels massive?
Yeah. Cup coffee. Cup a lot of coffee. Cup all the coffees. Cup. Whatever about everything else that's going on out there, cup your coffees. Cup daily.
And then someone asked, will Pepe and Donche restock?
No. I have a little bit of a gap, but, and I only got a little box from Pepe this year. Donche is nearly gone. I might actually have a few bags, so watch the site for Donche. But that'll be in a few weeks. Keep an eye out. We've got some things in transit. Typica Mejorado, or Mejorado, not to be confused with Typica, from Ecuador. Also have Bourbon, which I have an affinity for Bourbons of all types and terroirs from Ecuador. So Bourbon from Ecuador, from a COE winning farmer. So we have some really exciting coffees coming through that, you know, when you see a coffee go away and it's sold out, it's because I've decided to have a coffee within season or while it's in peak freshness. If you see, so a lot of these coffees are timing out great, so where it's like, okay, let's bring in something that's been harvested more recently, like Ecuador or Colombia coming in soon. And then this spring, Ethiopia, Kenya, things like that.
Okay, and then how are you sorting the Quakers? Yes.
Well, I'm buying from farmers that do a great job in processing and pulling out Quakers. Interesting thing that's been happening is that they have a new density sorter post roast for roasters to use. Some roasters you might know have them. They are very expensive. They're expensive at the mill at origin, and they're expensive post roast here at in roasting country. So I don't do any of that sort of stuff. I do kind of like get caught in pulling out Quakers, but when I'm bagging coffee. But generally, what you see is what we got, and for the most part, it's been a pretty great sorting. But it happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, generally speaking, you're picking some of the best coffees out there in the world, and they look pretty good. At least when I get the bags in, I look at the coffee, I'm like, yeah, it looks fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you do find a stray Quaker, take it out before you brew.
Yeah, just do that. They're pretty obvious. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we've been on for about an hour and a half, and definitely want to thank everybody who's been watching. And apologies for some of the stream cutting out here and there, but we will probably be shooting some other videos since we're here. Mainly, well, you'll probably can find it on his website after, like how do you actually brew some of these coffees and all of that. But otherwise, Preston is a local to me, so he's a local resource and always coming back. Love coming to his place, and there's a lot of other interesting topics we can discuss. But for today, we wanted to just talk, kind of get that catch up on Flower Child, on what Preston's been up to, and also have a little bit of a discussion with you guys on clean coffee and roasting and all of that. And thanks everyone for watching and for all the questions.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're gonna wrap up now. See you guys later.
Ciao now.
All right. I'm gonna shut the stream off.
Flowerchildcoffee.com.
Yeah, flowerchildcoffee.com.
Love me an online order.